This is Creepy and Geeky. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, I'll be talking to Cat Voleur about Legend and Willow for my 80s kindertrauma series. But first, it's time to talk to Donna about the stuff we got into this last week. How's it going, Donna?
Hey, Robert, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Just all right.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a week.
I think it's been that week for everybody. Was last week, did we have a full moon or something? Because
We
literally
did.
everybody
We
I
actually
talked to,
did. Yep.
yeah, I think that must have been it. Because every person that I've talked to, be it on Instagram or outside of social media, they've all had a rough week, and I did too.
Yeah.
But I made through. Hopefully next week, this week coming won't be bad. I hope.
Yeah, fingers crossed it'll be a better week this next week for sure.
And it was so nice. We had like this little glimpse of fall, and now temperatures are going back up again.
I know. It's ridiculous. It's like it was in the 60s and now it's going back up. Yeah, I'm looking at the weather right now. Of course, we got to talk about our weekly weather segment. But yeah, no, the next week it's going to be in the 80s again. I'm like, what the hell, man?
It
Like
was so
it was
nice.
finally sweater weather.
Yeah, man. It was so nice. It was nice. The windows were open. We were sleeping with the windows open. It was so nice and cool in here. Now I'm like, okay, AC back on. Just fuck my life.
I hear you.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, I'm gonna tell you, I don't really have a whole lot. I say that all the time, and then I end up having like four or five things. But I think you have way more than I do. So I'm gonna let you start this week.
Well, I definitely have a few things. I went out to the movies a couple of times this week, and I got to see some new stuff. Finally, it's been a couple of weeks since I've actually been to the theater. It's been kind of
Right.
the movies at the theater have been kind of down for me, and so there wasn't a lot that I was really itching to go see. So, but this last week, I caught up on a couple of things, and I finally watched. So I wasn't going to watch this, but Terrifier 3 has come out, and I wasn't going to watch it in the theater because I'm not a huge Terrifier person. I
Hmm.
didn't care for the first one, and I thought the second one was just okay. I thought it was better. I liked the lore and stuff that went into it, and I loved Lauren Lavera as Sienna. She's definitely like somebody to keep an eye out on, and I hope she'll not only just be in this, but maybe in some other cool horror stuff as well. But my co-host over on Horrific Heroes had done a review about how he said, now I gotta look it up real quick. He said something very specific that hit with me. He said, it's insane to me that I can go from really disliking a franchise to liking a franchise to loving a franchise within 3 installments. And I was like, well, crap. Now I have to go see it because it's basically kind of how I've been with it. Like I disliked it, I kind of liked it, and now I'm actually kind of full in with this damn fucking series.
Really?
But yeah, because so I rewatched number two. I wasn't gonna go back and rewatch number one, but I rewatched number two the night before I went to go see number three.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? This is actually even better than the last time I watched it. And like the lore just hits better. And there's not a whole lot of lore. They're kind of laying some groundwork, and it gets laid a little bit more in number three. But yeah, with number three, it's just they amped up kind of the kind of like Art has always been kind of a goofy, kind of
Hmm.
funny character. They tried to make him humorous, but it's always come off as mean humor. And whereas this time it felt both a combination of playful and kind of like childlike as well. And so there was this, or not childlike, but like, playful and whimsical, kind of like that, where it's just more
Hmm.
like he's having a good time, but it's not always mean spirited. And so I appreciated that a little bit more this go around. Um, and so that helped a lot with me. I think it's funny though too, because the filmmaker has been um he people have said that the first two Terrifier movies, especially the first one, is very misogynistic, very brutal towards women. In the first two
Mhm.
movies, women do get killed very brutally and everything. Whereas in this one, it's like he made a very like conscious effort to kill more men in this. And but at the same time, as I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, well, you're doing it, but like it feels like you're pointing out, hey, see, I can kill dudes too. It's like you didn't have to do that. I get what you're doing, but you didn't have to do it that way. So but no, I did find it this one was actually really good. It rocketed into I never would have believed this before I watched it, but it rocketed into my top 10 for the year.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, and it's not at the edge of my top 10. It's actually kind of like it's not middle, but it's kind of
Higher up there, huh?
it's kind of higher up in the top 10. So
Wow.
yeah, so
I
it's
gotta I gotta really embrace and watch these because I really have never given them a chance, and
yeah.
I just wanna I'm curious now
Have
because
you
I've
watched number
seen
two yet?
I haven't watched the first one.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah,
No.
definitely give them a try. I think one and two are both on Amazon right now.
Okay,
So
cool.
so definitely give those a shot. Just know going in that number two or number one is more of a proof of concept kind of movie. This is what I want to show people. Look, I want to create a iconic slasher and I want to show my special effects artistry.
Mhm.
And because he does Damien Leone, who directs them, writes and directs the movies, also does a lot of the effects work on the first two movies. Um, by the third one, he's they've made enough money. Number two made a ton of money, so they were able to actually hire more crew and stuff. And it's the first time he's been able to actually like you make it with a big crew. So so yeah,
Now let
definitely
me retract my statement. I tried watching the first one and I wasn't feeling it, and then I
yeah
cut it off. So I think I
yeah
need to go back and
yeah.
try it again.
And here's the thing: if you skip number one, like
Mhm.
there's stuff that continues on into number two that is referenced and stuff. So you kind of have to watch number one, but you only have to watch number one once, I feel. And then once you get past that, you can watch two and three and everything else. So but yeah, no, I'm interested to see what they come up with for the future. So I'm not like huge like ooh, Art the Clown, like he's like my favorite slasher or anything like that. But I mean, they've done well enough that I am actually interested to see where they go from here, and I'm digging what they're doing so far. So
Cool.
but yeah. And then the other movie I got to see this week was the new Pharrell Williams Lego biopic. um which was odd to see it in the Lego, but once you like kind of get past that, it's interesting and it makes sense in terms of the story he's trying to tell. So um but yeah, it just kind of goes through his whole life, his whole life story in a way, and obviously it's glossing over certain things here and there. And it obviously puts him in a good light because he's the one, you know, the focus of it and everything.
Right.
So because I know that there's some people who don't exactly like him, and he's kind of done some shitty things over the years and everything, but who hasn't? Um so if you're mildly interested in his music and him as a person, and I've always been a fan of his music, so it really does go through everything. It goes through his childhood, goes through his time during the Neptunes. It barely touches on NERD, which is weird. But there's like three songs from NERD in the movie, so it's like it touches on it, but kind of doesn't at the same time. Um, and then talks about his solo career stuff afterward. So
Hmm.
but yeah, so it's a pretty interesting movie though.
That's the piece by piece, right?
Piece by
Something like
piece,
that. Yeah.
yep. So yeah,
Well, that's
so
interesting. I'll definitely check it out probably when it's streaming. I don't
yeah
see myself going to it, but I definitely will check it out.
yeah. All right, what was your first thing you got for me today?
I mean, well, a couple of things are actually coming to streaming this month. I just wanted to shout those out. One of them is Maxine that actually dropped on HBO Max on Saturday.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that one's already there. So if you didn't see it in theaters, you can see it there. I actually watched it last night, and it was good.
I liked it. I'm sorry, but it after watching it now, I've only watched it the one time. But I liked it and felt like to me it was my favorite of the series. Because it more embraced the kinds of things that I like in my horror
Hmm.
stuff. Whereas I liked X, I didn't care for Pearl. I thought Pearl was good, but it was definitely my least favorite and still my least favorite because I just don't care for that musical era and everything. And I think that she gets a little too crazy in that one.
Yeah, I kind of wish
Um,
we just had X and Maxine. I feel like we really didn't need Pearl.
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
just,
because it doesn't really like I get why they did it, but at the same time, like it wasn't Maxine's story. And so like I would have liked maybe another like piece of Maxine's story more than
mhm.
Pearl's story. So but yeah, so I really liked Maxine. So I thought it
So
was yeah,
that
go ahead.
was the first one, and then I believe next weekend they're actually playing Trap, also on
Mm,
HBO Max. So
yeah,
that one I'm excited for, and I know you saw that in
I
theaters.
did. Yeah.
So I know there's some mixed reviews on it. I'm there totally for Josh Hartnett, but I do want to see how this plays out, and I also want to hear M. Night's daughter's music. I heard that,
It's good. Yeah.
yeah.
It's good. Yeah, I think that I get people's frustrations with it, but at the same time, I because they don't like the third act.
Hmm.
And but I think that it makes sense in terms of the overall story. So, and I think that also because there's no real big twist and everybody's just used to his twists.
Right.
And so I think that's what just kind of what bugged people too.
That's the thing too. When you go into it with high expectations, just go into it and see how it unfolds. But if you're expecting a monumental twist and you get none, then you're like, oh, that movie wasn't that great. No, your expectation was a little too high. It's just a
Yeah.
movie. We're there to be entertained. That's it. It ain't that deep.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, those are my only two to start.
Okay. Well, I'll start with a trailer that hopefully you don't have on your list. Um, the new Creature Commandos trailer. That's the new animated series coming from DC and James Gunn. So it's very much it's like set earlier and it's like a proto Suicide Squad. So instead of using superhumans, they're using like monsters as their expendable soldiers. So it looks fun and interesting. It's animated, so they can go even crazier with the special effects and the blood and
Right.
gore and everything. So and it's going to be bloody and gory from the trailer. They are just exploding bodies left and right. So it's pretty
Oh my
bad. So
gosh.
and it's great because they get to do stuff they couldn't do in live action. So,
I
but
think wasn't one of the voice actors in that Frank Grillo?
yeah, he's playing General Flag, Rick Flag's father.
Father, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah. So but yeah. So what else you got for me?
So the reason I asked you about Frank Grillo,
This one's on my list.
well, then we can talk about it then.
Yes.
So a trailer for Werewolves dropped, and it's directed by Stephen C. Miller, I should say that. And he made the 2012 horror comedy Silent Night, and I'm all in for this because Frank Grillo is in this movie,
Yeah.
and the whole premise for it is so crazy about a supermoon, event that triggers people who have that latent werewolf gene, and they
Right.
turn into now. It's got the werewolves that we love, obviously the
Yes.
bipedal ones. I want to see them on their hind legs, just
Yeah.
towering over people. So I'm already 100% sold, but it looks off the chain. Like, just the trailer with him going bite me and then seeing all of these weird things going on. I'm sold.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I am 100% sold on it as well. It looks fun. It looks like a crazy action horror extravaganza. So it's definitely going to be bloody and just lots of craziness for sure. All right. Well, the next one I have is they just dropped a teaser for The Strangers Chapter 2, which is following up on the Strangers Chapter 1 that came out earlier this year that did
Mhm.
not do well in the theaters. But that is largely because it was basically a recreation of the first movie. Um, like they changed a few things here and there, but it was largely exactly like the original. So I think that they were just trying to update that because they wanted to tell more story with that same character, with the same woman lead. And um, um, so I think that they were like really wanted to focus on chapter 2 and chapter 3, but they needed to retell chapter 1 to make sure she lives at the end.
Mhm.
And um, so because of that, they're going into that. So I'm interested, definitely. I thought chapter 1 was okay, but it didn't do anything spectacularly different or better than the original did. So I'm interested, but that should be coming pretty soon. So, but yeah, a teaser came out and it looks interesting. Check that out. What else you got for
What else do I have? Let's see. I
me?
told you I didn't bring all that much. So, if you're familiar with the artist, music artist Flying Lotus, he actually is going to be having a new movie coming out in 2025, and it's called Ash. It's a sci-fi horror film. I don't know if you saw his film on Shutter. He has one
I
called
haven't.
Crusoe. Okay.
No.
Um, so this one I'm kind of interested in, and it does have a kind of almost like an alien storyline, and it's all about a crew member who wakens out of the cryo sleep and finds her whole crew is slaughtered, and there's someone that comes to her aid who is rescuing her, but probably isn't someone that she should be trusting. Um, Flying Lotus is odd. He has a very odd way of telling stories, but I enjoy when I watch them. He has one of my favorite segments on VHS 99, and it's just all kinds of fucked up and weird. And I just, God bless him. I mean, I love his music, but his eye for making movies is a little weird, but I'm oddly comfortable with the weirdness that he likes to bring.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I'll
So
definitely have to
yeah.
check that out.
So it's coming out in 2025, and then obviously when it comes to streaming, it'll be with Shutter because I think they just
Yeah,
love having all of his stuff.
that's cool. Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's see, what else do I got? Well, there's a new movie coming from Osgood Perkins, who just came out with Long Legs this year. His next one is I think I think being produced by James Wan. I could be wrong, but I'm
Yeah,
pretty
that
sure
was
that's
what I
who it
was
is.
going to
Yeah.
talk about too. But
Oh
go ahead.
no.
No, go ahead.
It's called The Monkey, and it's based on a Stephen King story. I don't think I've ever read the Stephen King story, but this movie looks nuts. It just looks crazy and bonkers in the best ways. Like there's just some bizarre stuff like this coming in, like a woman casually pushing a stroller down a street that's on fire. Um, so yeah, check out that trailer because it's very nuts.
Yeah, I remember the story, but I do have a feeling that the story is going to be completely twisted and changed. Oz Perkins is on a roll, and the fact that he has Theo James in this film, well, I already have a crush. I have a crush on everybody. Y'all should be used to it. But I get to see him play more than one because he's actually playing a set of twins in this movie. And if you don't know anything about the story, just go in, don't read it.
Right.
That's all I can tell you. Um, yeah, the trailer was great. All kinds of weird and dastardly things are going to happen, and it looks like it's going to be darkly funny. It's his sense of humor. It looks like it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, the trailer looks nuts, so I can imagine the movie's going to be definitely just as crazy. So, but yeah, no, that looks really good. All right. Did you have anything else, or did I steal your last one?
No, no, no. I have one more. I
Okay.
had a feeling that we were both going to talk about that because just you're going to be unnerved by that. Just, I beg you, don't read the story.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So the last thing I have is Nick Frost, who has been on a crazy roll of
Right.
horror movies.
I think this one's on my list too.
Is it really?
I think so.
So I already brought up Crazy House a few episodes way back, and then I talked
Yeah.
about The Getaway a couple episodes ago.
Yep.
So now he's going to be in The Black Cab, which is going
Yes.
to be
Yeah.
on Shudder in November. What did you think about the trailer for this?
It looks interesting. Yeah.
It
No,
looks
it looks
really creepy.
yeah, it looks very creepy. There's definitely something going on. He's like some kind of weird cab driver, and there's like a ghost involved, and like there's so much going on in this thing, and he's like trapping this couple who have some issues. Um, so he's trapping him inside the cab for some reason, I guess, to be attacked by this ghost. I'm not positive, but yeah, no, it looks very crazy. Like it looks good. It
Yeah,
looks good, and I'm
he's
loving that Nick
really
Frost is like all over like horror lately. Like
yeah, I love that. It's so
yeah,
nice to see him because they're all different in some way, but
yeah,
still creepy. Um, it's yeah, the black hat, that's gonna be crazy. And it looks like the couple already had some kind of issue to begin with, like
yes,
they got into the cab arguing. So this is gonna be a hard one to see how they're gonna pull together or survive this. I don't know.
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
So that was my last one, I swear.
Well, I only have one more after that now. So I have a there's another trailer out that just came out for a movie called The Last Video Store. And it's being put out by Black Fawn Distribution. They had previously put out a movie that I really love called gosh, I'm completely blanking on the name right now. Vicious Fun. Vicious Fun is crazy 80s um like set in the 80s slasher movie goofiness. It's on Shutter right now. But the last video store looks really cool. This woman brings this tape to this video store, and it's like a Necronomicon type of videotape. And it just opens up all kinds of nastiness for them. But it's all neon colored and everything, and just it's a wild looking horror comedy. So I'm completely sold in on it. So as soon as I can get myself a copy, I'm gonna grab myself a copy of that. So
Oh wow.
yeah. So, but yeah, that's all I had for today. Quite a few things. I'm glad we have a couple. I'm glad we ended up with a couple of double ups. I figured we probably would, but but yeah, no, that's really cool. But before we move on, why don't you let people know what's going on your show this week?
Okay, so I'm still doing my Blacktober series, and I decided to go a little back into the past, and I pulled out an old blaxploitation sorta kinda film called The Beast Must Die. And um, this one, it's kind of an oddball one, but I really picked it because I love the black character that's the main star of this film, and it's basically a werewolf whodunit. Just stick with me. And it's Amicus Productions, so it's kind of it feels almost like a Hammer movie, but Amicus, they do a lot of great horror movies anyway. But this one is just it's one that you have to witness for yourself. I'm not saying
Right.
it's great. I'm just saying you need to watch it for yourself. So if you want to come and listen to me kind of just talk about this movie for a little bit and explain exactly what a werewolf whodunit is, just tune into my show so you can hear. I'm already giggling. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm talking about this week.
All right, that's cool. I think you've talked about it before on your show, like maybe briefly.
On a werewolf episode, yeah, I did
Yeah,
bring it up when I talked about werewolves
yeah. So
because I love them so much.
yeah, so yeah. No, I think I put it on my list like all that time ago, and I haven't watched it yet. So I'll
Yeah.
have to definitely give it a watch, so I can make sure to listen to your episode. So all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on again, like you do every week. And make sure to go follow her over on Instagram at Donna the Dead, all one word. Or no, that one's got the hyphens in it, right?
Yeah, that one's got the hyphen
Donna
underscore.
hyphen, Donna underscore THA underscore dead. So,
Thank you.
and then make sure to go follow her podcast because she's a lot of fun. And of course, that's why I have her on here every week. So,
Oh, you're
oh,
sweet.
sweets to the sweet. Uh, but yeah, no, appreciate you coming on, and we will talk to you again next week. On today's episode, it's the conclusion of my 80s kindertrauma series with Legend and Willow. And joining me for this episode is Cat Voleur. Cat is the co-host of the podcasts Slasher Radio and the Nick F and Woo Cage Cast. She's also the author of the novels Revenge Arc, The Desert Island Game, My Apologies to Tanya Grace, and more. Welcome back to the show, Cat.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's always
It's
good
been
to
a
have you.
while.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. I realized that earlier. I was like, wow, it really has been a while. Um, but yeah, it's always good to have you on. You're always good about saving my bacon, like I always say. This time not so much. I mean, you were very gracious in pushing back a couple of times this episode when I needed it, but luckily we had this one scheduled on the books for a while. So
Yeah.
yeah, so but yeah, no, this is the culmination, the concluding episode of my as it stands for now, the 80s Kenda Trauma series. Um, and while these two aren't really like super dark, there's definitely some dark elements to them both, especially Legend. So um, definitely want to get into both of those. These are both fantasy movies, and both movies I'd never seen before, even though
Really?
yeah, even though I
I
grew up in the 80s.
I
So
shouldn't be surprised. I will say there was a part of me that was really so I'm not a and I talk about this a lot in horror context uh but it's like I was not a kid of the 80s. I don't
yeah,
have nostalgia for the 80s. The
right.
Kids on Bikes movie started coming out a couple years ago and I was like, what is this? I don't understand what this. Um and like there are a lot of movies that get kind of grouped in because they are horror adjacent,
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
that came out of the 80s that I just don't have the like fond nostalgia for. However, I am a big fantasy nerd. So like when we were first talking about doing an episode for this series, and you sent me the lineup, it was like, I'm not going to have seen any of these movies. And then I saw these two, and it's like, was on the one hand, it was like really surprising for me to see that these were because these feel like the heavy hitters of the 80s for me, being a big fantasy nerd. And I was like, how on earth did someone not come along and scoop these up first thing? And then on the other hand, it's like these have always been super underrated movies, I think, of the 80s. They don't get talked about a lot in the way that a lot of other 80s movies do. And
Yeah.
this was the age of fantasy epics, so yeah, I was
So
really happy to hop in for these.
yeah, no, I was glad too because nobody else wanted them, and so it was just like, okay, so hey, but
Which is insane.
this is
This
kind
is
of
like,
you in a nutshell in this show too, because you
yeah,
come on
it
so many
is.
episodes that nobody else wants to do.
But this is
So
like, I can't believe this is like we've got Ron Howard, we've got George Lucas, we've got Ridley Scott,
yeah, and
like
both of these movies did not do well. That's the thing.
I
It's
know, but they're so good.
these okay, so here's my thing though too, and this is why I didn't watch them until recently. I'm not a
Yeah.
fantasy person. So
Yeah.
and so for me, and I think a lot of people in the 80s, fantasy, there was a lot of fantasy movies at the time too, and I think that's why something like Labyrinth didn't do well as well. Like
Yeah.
it was they were doing it like
And
you said. There was a lot of fantasy movies in the 80s, and so there was this like everybody was like, hey, let's do a whole bunch of stuff, and then like everybody's like, but why? Nobody really wants them. So it
And
was
I'm glad you
weird.
brought that up because, like, Labyrinth and the other one I always think of as Dark Crystal ended up
Yeah,
getting huge cult followings
but
after the
Labyrinth,
fact.
but Dark Crystal
Like,
did well in the theater. It did do well
it
in the
did.
theater, and then still maintained a cult following. Although I'll argue that it's lesser, like it's more of a cult thing now. Um, you don't hear about it talked in like such huge tones as Labyrinth did, which did fail in the theater and got a huge cult following afterward. And
Huge,
our
huge cult following.
Labyrinth is much bigger than Dark Tower at this point, or Dark Crystal.
Dark
So
Crystal.
yeah. So
Labyrinth might be bigger than Dark Tower at this point. Who knows?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. We'll see. One of these days, Flanagan's gonna make the Dark Tower, and I'll be happy. So
oh man, yeah.
so but yeah, no, so these movies were kind of that they were a big for me, they just weren't on my radar because I just wasn't that fantasy kid. And
Yeah.
so I knew they had come out. I was like, oh hey, George Lucas, is producing this thing, but I was like, nah, whatever. um but
I
and go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I've got my mom to thank for these, I think, because my fantasy phase, I was a huge fantasy nerd as a kid,
Right.
but it got phased out because I hit my horror quote unquote phase pretty
Yeah.
young. Uh but yeah, there were I was just gobbling up like all the fantasy content I could get when I was little, and mom was like, she showed me, I think Labyrinth was the first one, and then like, you know, Last Unicorn and
Yeah.
like the animated Hobbit, and then from that point she was just kind of scrambling through things, but she also um was a big fantasy person, so
Right.
stuff like this was like right up her alley, and I got to see a lot of these. And I do have, I don't have the big nostalgia for them, I guess,
Right.
uh but they were a big part of my childhood. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it was nice to see them on the list.
Yeah, I wanted to include some stuff like, the bulk of it was obviously the big hitters, a lot of the big
Yeah.
stuff and everything. And when I was trying to think of the movies to come up with that, I knew I could probably come up with more, but then I was just like, I remember Legend being like really like having heard Legend was really dark.
Yeah.
And and I knew Willow had some dark moments to it, and I just felt they were a good pairing together, and they did, and they really did work out well. They're very similar in what they're going for in their own ways.
They
Um,
are.
but yeah, it is interesting to let's go ahead and start with Legend, a Ridley Scott movie from 1985, starring Tom Cruise, Mia Sara, and Tim Curry in probably one of his best roles.
Yeah.
Anytime you get Tim Curry kind of just going off the chain in really cool makeup, it just works.
That's
Um,
another reason why I'm really surprised that Legend doesn't have a bigger cult following, is because I feel like almost every Tim Curry movie has a cult following
yeah,
except for Legend.
yeah.
And he's so iconic in it,
I think it's just, like for me and like just for my own when watching it, it's a very beautifully shot movie.
Yeah.
Tim Curry's performance is like really, really good. He gets these moments where he just gets to like, pontificate and like, just get to do his just use his voice and you just melt into that voice the whole time, even though it's kind of modulated to make it even like deeper and stuff. It's an interesting movie, but I feel like it's a little too thin for me. There was just like I I I saw the theatrical version. I know there's a director's cut version that's supposed to be longer. It's got a different score on it, which was the original score for by Jerry Goldsmith. The score that was in this one was by Tangerine Dream, which I like that score. And it and it's longer and it has more nuance to it about the humans and the other characters having darkness already within them. It was kind of like this meditation on how you really aren't going to be able to get rid of the darkness totally, but
Yeah.
you know, you do what you can to fight it. Um, and
I'm glad
so
that you brought this up
yeah,
because when I would watch this with my mom has like the collector's edition fancy
right.
one.
Yeah,
So I was used to seeing the director's cut. I was having issues with my TV today.
yeah,
So I ended up renting a copy of this because I figured it was just going to be faster
yeah.
than fighting with cables and stuff. I actually saw the theatrical version for the first time, and it is different.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
Um,
Yeah, that's cool. I think
and
it's
I do think the
go ahead.
biggest thing, more than like the themes, which I'm
Yeah,
sure if I had seen it more recently, I'm sure the themes would have felt like a much sharper contrast.
right.
But the soundtrack was the thing that really set me off, where I was like, what am I watching? I had to like confirm it was the same movie.
That's funny. I'm assuming the soundtrack is like completely different. You know, it's just more of a fantasy type of, you know, theme work rather than, you know, like a synth, like a like a synth,
Yeah.
you know, thing going on.
This felt
So
very, and I'm not going to say that it's bad, but
yeah.
I was expecting that epic fantasy score that I remembered, and I got more of like a very dreamlike, whimsical, like I wasn't quite sure what was going on with the sound today.
Yeah, it's interesting too because this is like twice now that Ridley Scott has had two of his movies in the 80s tinkered with, so much so that he had to have a later director's cut that becomes more of his definitive like version with this and Blade Runner. Um
Yeah.
so it's interesting that he's had this happen to him twice. Um, it's just I know that it was so his original, like there's an international cut of it, and that's closer to what the director's cut is. It's not exactly the same as the international cut. So there is an international version also, that's even more like slightly different from that too. They just was Arrow just put it out not too long ago on a disc, with the director's cut and the theatrical cut, but they couldn't get the rights for the international cut. So
Ah,
apparently that's still
okay.
out there somewhere. If you can, like people with region B players or whatever, like, you know, go check it out. But it's but yeah, so I think that it's interesting that he what he did was for American audiences, he cut it down from the original international cut. It got cut down, and then it got cut down even more to like an hour and a half. Basically, he dumbed it down for American audiences because we weren't sophisticated enough to understand the nuances in the story. So,
To be, to be
you know,
completely fair, though, there are
yeah.
like entire studios whose job is just to dumb things down for
Oh yeah.
American audiences today.
Oh yeah.
So ahead of his
100%.
time, Ridley Scott.
Yeah. He didn't have a choice. He was told to do that.
Yeah,
So
he had
I
to.
he wanted to keep it the way it was, but yeah, no, you can't trust Americans to, you know, get anything straight. So um but yeah, no, it's an interesting movie. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I think um there's definitely some interesting stuff going on in this. Mia Sarah is this was her first role. Um so that was interesting. She did a good job. You know, this was Tom Cruise right during, like just right before, it's like a year before Top Gun comes out, which was by Tony Scott, Ridley Scott's brother. So he got to work with both Scott brothers.
Oh.
Um and so it's an interesting piece because he'd already had some modicum of fame with Risky Business and some of the other stuff he'd done, but he wasn't the superstar level. It's not until Top Gun hits that he gets superstar. So it definitely is like a young, very young looking, um very interesting look at Tom Cruise at that time. Um, that I don't know. It's I I I enjoyed bits and pieces of it, but like I said, I didn't really love it in terms of the overall thing. I gave it a 3 star on Letterboxd because it's good. It's not bad. It's not a terrible movie. I wasn't bored. But yeah, it's just it's just a movie. Again, fantasy doesn't work as well for me, like in large part.
I will say, so I'm I have a weird relationship with fantasy movies. I really like fantasy books and
Right,
fantasy games. And I grew up, I guess, more with the fantasy movies. I
right,
I really miss this like specific fantasy aesthetic from the 80s. Um, and I think Legend is maybe one of my favorites just in terms of visuals. You know, it has this
yeah.
very ethereal vibe. I and you know this from talking horror movies with me too. I'm a big sucker for practical effects.
Oh
A-
yeah, yeah.
And you know, the makeup, the prosthetics, the costume design in Legend I think is lovely. Um I do have some issues, I think, with Legend specifically. I don't think it's perfect. And
Right,
I definitely wouldn't call it my favorite. It's up there. I like it a lot. I like the story of
right.
Legend. Even the dumbed down version that I saw for the first time today, I don't think it was terrible.
No.
Um, there's this kind of messiness that I also appreciate about it
Right.
because, like, I think and I'm guilty of this also. I have a lot of critiques of modern movies that I make like this, where it's like you have to show and not tell, and
Right.
you're muddying characters because we only get to spend like this little bit of time with them. We should have a really clear idea of who they are. There's something that's just very human about the characters and the way that they're written in Legend, where
Right.
it's like we're supposed to get, the idea that Lily is like this pure, innocent creature that can distract the unicorn and all of this stuff. But she's kind of mischievous and she's breaking a lot of
Yeah.
rules and like I but I like that I like the idea that her innocence comes more from like naive good intentions than it does from like just this more modern sense of purity, you know?
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
feel like this is a movie that would be even more dumbed down if it were made today. Um
Yeah, I could see what's going on. Yeah, I could see it being even more dumbed down in a way. I think they would also overcomplicate it in ways
oh,
too.
probably because like
You know,
we'd have lore for all the different like tiers of goblins and
right. Yeah.
like it would
I,
be a 3-hour film
yes.
and
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it would have been a 3 hour film. Yeah, because everything's got to be Lord of the Rings now if it's a fantasy movie. So everything's got to be like exactly like Lord of the Rings.
yeah, I take it back.
Um,
It would be a 9-hour film because we have like three parts that are each. Yeah,
yeah. I just yeah, it's interesting. Just yeah, you're not wrong. It's I think that's what goes into his like what his what he was going for in every character was just that there are these every character they have this like Lily, like you said, was innocence, but it's a mischievous innocence.
yeah.
It's you know, Tom Cruise's character, which I can't remember his name now. Um,
Jack,
he
I
Jack,
think.
yeah, I was thinking Jack too. Um, his character is um, you know, also kind of like eh, kind of simple but
Yeah.
also, and seems to be so very nice and good, but he's also kind of quick to anger.
Yes.
And so, and every one of them, like, what's the fairies, she's like, she's supposed to be all good and everything, but she's also mischievous and also, flirty. And, so they each have these, you know, each of the characters that are along with him on this journey all have their own like dualities and stuff that make them both good and bad. And so it
Yeah.
was interesting for that story to kind of like come through um, without it being completely knocked over your head either.
Yes.
So, um, but I do think it's funny too because both of these movies start with like an opening text bit telling us about the story and everything before it jumps into it. And it's like this is just so fantasy right here that you've got to have the once upon a time in the beginning. Like this just is
Yeah.
the little piece of exposition just to kind of ease you into the world before you jump in.
It was something that was really funny because I didn't remember Legend as well as I remembered Willow coming
Yeah.
into this. And when I sat down to watch Willow, it's like this is such a like this is such a Howard Lucas thing to have the text crawl at the beginning of this
Right.
movie. And I'm like kind of laughing at it and stuff, and then Legend started the same way and I was like, "Oh no. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
This one too." Um
Yeah.
but the one thing that I think it did miss the mark on, and it's been a while since I've seen the director's cut, so don't hold me to this. But the one thing that I was really confused about today that felt very different story-wise was I'm pretty sure the conversation between Lily and Tim Curry, um, he's just always Tim Curry,
Yeah.
was longer. Like when they're having the dinner, it
Right.
felt in this cut like it went really, really quick from I will never do anything for your pleasure to I want to kill the unicorn myself. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's not a convincing ruse when like
Yeah, no,
um
I that definitely felt sudden too, to me, and especially because he just went with it too. He was just like, well, yeah, okay. So it does feel like there could have been some extra stuff in there where she kind of like builds up to it rather than just
I
suddenly like, yeah.
certainly remember that being a
And it
longer
makes
and more
yeah.
believable conversation. Of course, it also could have just been, like I was younger and easier to trick with stuff last time I saw it.
Could be.
Um,
What also feels like a part that could have been cut for time and stuff. And so it feels
yeah.
like it would definitely would be because like I don't know if like the fact that the other I guess the the director's cut is probably closer to 2 hours. Like that's a whole half hour of stuff that I don't know that we necessarily needed. Like because watching this cut of it was like hour and a half wasn't a bad time for it. It seemed to clip along pretty fairly okay without much in the way of like getting bogged down. And that's what a lot of movies do. I would say even Willow does that at times. Not too bad. Willow was actually pretty brisk as well for its 2 hour runtime. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of times where movies just kind of pad out their time. And they and here's the thing, being just as pretty and well shot that this movie was, I can see that they probably did a lot more lingering like fantasy, ethereal shots to kind of pad it out and stuff. So, hopefully that was all it was. But if so, then I can understand why they cut some of it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Tim Curry is extremely great in this movie. Like I said before, like the makeup effects on him, his whole look is just that's the kind of the most kind of scary slash dark part of the movie. And having it for kids in the 80s, I can see where that would be something dark that maybe you wouldn't pull off so well in a movie kind of for kids these days.
Yeah. I think his design is one of those things that would have been. And I remember, as a kid, uh, this was especially in comparison to because again, one of like my mom's favorite things that we would watch was The Last Unicorn, and this has a
Right.
very similar plot structure, I guess. Uh, but is that one is actually made for kids,
Right.
whereas this one less so. And this one did feel a lot scarier because there are all of these real world like ramifications where it's not just like the abstract concept of magic will fade when the last unicorn is,
Right.
gone.
Yeah.
It's like the world will plunge into eternal darkness and
Yeah.
everything will freeze over and, you know, humans will be overrun by goblins and defenseless. And yeah, it was like this one felt a lot more the stakes felt raised
Oh
in
yeah.
this
And
one.
this movie was PG too. So I mean, now
Yeah.
again, this is 1982 PG, so it could like I could see this one easily becoming a PG-13 in the later years once they introduced PG-13. But yeah, definitely felt like it was a lot darker than Willow, which was also rated PG. And Willow's got some stuff that I would hazard to say it would probably garner a PG-13 these days as well. Maybe not so much. PG, well, probably PG-13. There's a lot of violence in Willow. But we'll get to that. But yeah, this one, being PG, being very dark, like you said, having those more real world consequences, definitely a like, and again, neither one of these movies did well enough that I even heard any kids around that time talking about them. So so it just wasn't really that big. I do remember seeing like commercials or whatever for them during that time period, or they pop up on cable or whatever. But yeah, it just was never. I was just like, not my bag.
And I'll
So,
tell you something else. Kids growing up
oh yeah,
in the 90s and early 2000s certainly did not know what these two movies were.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
was
no.
picked on a lot. Uh,
Yeah, that's funny. Ah, that's,
my last like note for
yeah,
this as
go
it
ahead.
is, I'm not sure that it's relevant at all to this discussion, but Tim Curry I think was too good in this, and this is
Oh
kind of
yeah.
the issue that I have with a lot of these like 80s and early 90s fantasy movies is that if a weird looking demon with Tim Curry's voice is like, "Hey, be my bride. I am the Lord of Darkness and I'll give you whatever you want." I'd be like, "Yeah, okay." So
Right.
like and I go through it with like Labyrinth too, where it's like if David Bowie
Yeah.
comes up to me and is like, "I'll give you an entire goblin kingdom." I'm like, "I guess I'm team goblin."
Yeah.
Right?
You're like,
Like
I'm sold. Sorry, Toby.
yeah.
You were a great brother for the, year I had you, but it's time to be the queen of the goblins.
I'm like, I'm always too convinced to turn evil, which
No.
it's why the unicorn wouldn't let me pet it. I would not be the star of this movie. I get it. But like, man, Tim Curry made a really good case.
Hey, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what's great is when you have an actor of like Tim Curry's like talent, that you're gonna have somebody who, even despite how he looks and how he's acting, that just that innate charisma breaks through, and you're just like, yeah, dude, whatever. Let's
Yeah.
join up with the Darkness Squad here, man. So,
And it's what I'm saying. Like, if Lily had not thrown the tantrum immediately before
right.
saying that she wanted to kill the unicorn, I'd be like, okay, I get it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this one. It's just it's a very well shot, beautiful looking movie. I don't think Tom Cruise is doing a bad job in the movie. I don't he's not doing anything over much. He's a generic like fantasy hero. Um
Tom
and that
Cruise is the weakest part of this, I
Oh, for
think.
sure. For sure. Everybody else is doing okay. His sidekicks and everything, they're kind of just all throwaway and everything. Mia Sarah's doing a great job for her first movie. Especially against Tim Curry. So I mean, she's holding her own for the most part. And so yeah, no, it's really great. The Yeah, Tom Cruise is definitely the weak link out of those three. And I think that's possibly also where it's just like most people are just like, it's a weak movie. It's a great villain, but overall it's kind of a weakish movie. Um, so I get it, Maybe the
Yeah.
director's cut is better and maybe it's, got some more story to it that, ups it a little bit, but I can't see it being that much better. So but Willow, let's go into Willow, which came out in 1988, like you said, directed by Ron Howard, produced and with the story originally by George Lucas. George Lucas had wanted to do a fantasy story after he was done doing the Star Wars stuff. He commissioned a guy to write it. They went through some, I think like seven different scripts to get it nailed down, and then he wanted Ron Howard to um, direct because Ron Howard had you know evolved into a director after his acting career, and this was it's an interesting movie. It's early on in Val Kilmer's career. Um, it's what like this is after Top Gun now. So it's a before Tom Cruise before Top Gun and Val Kilmer after Top Gun. But it's a um, Warwick Davis is third billed, even though he is the name of the movie. So, so I'm like, really? Like you couldn't even give him top billing? Um,
It's
but
also
it's like,
really funny because I know that I'm in the minority here because of how many horror movies I watch, but Warwick Davis is the biggest name to me, like out
yeah,
of the entire
he's
cast.
a leprechaun.
Like obviously I know Val Kilmer in normal people
Yeah,
terms is the bigger name, but like
yeah.
I mean when I was watching the opening credits, it's like, yay, Warwick Davis,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Well,
oh,
and then that's the thing too, is like in the end credits, it's like Val Kilmer, Joanne Whalley, Warwick Davis. I'm like, how did Joanne Whalley get above Warwick Davis above all people? Like
I
at the
know.
very
And
least, he
he's
should have been second billed, but being third billed behind her was just
And it's
ridiculous.
not even like he's the main character. He's the title
Yeah, he's the
character. Like the
title
movie's
character. It's
literally called
named after
Willow.
him. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just, yeah, I was just like, what is going on? And I find it interesting too, because I had to look it up too, because I was like, it's pretty sure he was like 14 in um Return of the Jedi when he played Wicket. And I looked it up, and sure enough, he was 14. He had to have been 17 during the filming of Willow.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
That
like,
explains why he looks so I figure again, because I know him mostly from Leprechaun where he's got
yeah,
all of the like
yeah,
crusty makeup on, but I was watching this again and it's like Warwick Davis is a little baby. He was,
yeah,
is
yeah,
why.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, he was 17. But he was already in this movie, he's already married with two, like, had to have been like, you know, I would say 5 to 8 year old children.
Yeah.
So it's just really odd. Um, and it's just funny to like go back and see something like that and just kind of place that time on that and just go, he was doing a good job for a 17-year-old. So, like what, 1993 is when the first Leprechaun came out, which means he was only um like 23 at the time.
I don't think I
So
ever realized how young he was when he did Leprechaun.
yeah, me neither. Because I mean, the makeup makes him look old and everything like that. But he's
Yeah.
23. Like, it's so crazy to think about just how young he was when he like had like his biggest fame like that. Um,
Yeah.
and just it's amazing. Um, but yeah, no, he does a great job playing a dad and everything like that. I believed he was a dad, even though he was 17. So I mean,
Yeah.
he does a great job as doing that. I do think it's funny. This ended up being an unofficial or like an unintentional Billy Barty double feature. Because Billy Barty was one of the characters. He was Screwball in Legend, and then he was the I can't think of his name in Willow, but he was like the wizard of their village. So
Yeah.
so I thought that was interesting that it was like this unintentional Billy Barty double feature.
I didn't even realize that, but yeah, he was.
um so I mean that's the interesting thing. You don't see it as much nowadays. But like during the like I would say during the 80s especially, you had a lot of movies with dwarf people. Um um is it dwarf or midget? I think it's dwarf. Yeah, dwarf. Um so you had a lot more of them in movies and stuff. And I think
Yeah.
they got away from that because they started just with visual effects, they started just kind of miniaturizing people, like doing more forced perspective. Because it was interesting in Legend with his Jack's bunch of people, the fairy and the one boy that's there. I can't think of his name offhand. But like the shirtless boy, the whole time I was just like, how young are they? But
I
they
will
were
say the shirtless boy was a little bit disconcerting.
apparently he was 18 though. So
I Yeah, it's one of those things. I knew that he
Yeah.
was older, but it like he
And the
very
fairy
much
cur
looks like a shirtless boy.
Oh, he does. Yeah. No, it's yeah. And then the fairy in that one, the girl in that one, she was 24 at the time. So I was like,
Okay.
wow, they was like, is a combination of just like I'm assuming makeup and forced perspective a lot of times. So
Yeah.
maybe they were using a little boy in the wide shots. And then, when they could do it and get away with it, they would, you know, move them around or whatever, make them look shorter than they were. But yeah, in this one, they used, a whole village of dwarfs, and then they did a digital trickery in this one, doing the brownies, just making them, regular tall-ish people, but just miniaturized. So yeah,
And this was
regular
something,
proportioned.
this is like what I was talking about when it's like I really like the mix of practical and CG effects because
Right.
we don't have movies that are done this way anymore. It's one of those like if you have to CG something, you might as well CG the whole thing. And it's
Well,
like,
they do still do that these days, and they're getting better about it, but they're getting so good at it that you don't notice it like you do in this one. Like in this
I
one, it feels so obvious, like because like, obviously the brownies are like they're obviously walking around on a stage, and then being like inserted into it. And that's kind of what they do nowadays, but they've made it more seamless and less, I don't know, obvious. It's the digital effects have gotten better.
I don't know that the effect overall is better though. Specifically I and I mean it's easy to say that because I know that we have big budget studios
Right.
now that are spending a lot of money on this. I'm not going to say that Willow looks better than like a Marvel movie, but like
Right.
I will say that I like the impact. I like the aesthetic of Willow more than I like something like say Rings of Power,
Oh
like
yeah.
another fantasy thing that's getting made today because it's like I do feel like you can, even though it's less obvious what is and isn't computer generated these days, I feel like the over shininess of it is
Mm,
taking away from that sense of like scale. You know what I
right.
mean? Like in
Yeah.
Willow, when they're doing magic and stuff, it really feels like it's there. Like they're interacting
Yeah.
with stuff in a way that I think a lot of modern fantasy stuff doesn't. And to be fair, I do also watch a lot less fantasy
Right.
now, but so I
No, and I
like all of my recent examples are just different TV shows, but like it
right.
was a big complaint I had about House of the Dragon was it's like they
Right.
have all these beautiful, beautiful landscapes in the back, and then everything in the foreground is just very animated. It's like, oh boy, I
Yeah.
don't like this.
No, and I can kind of get what you're saying. Like in this, like, if there's magic being used, it's like it's a digital effect, but there's a practical like effect to it. There's like
Yeah,
if they were to do something that affected the world around them, then it actually worked on the actual practical effect and not just like completely digital the whole time, which is kind of what they do nowadays.
yeah,
So and that makes sense. Um but yeah, no, and I get what you're saying, like especially with something like I think with like Rings of Power, where it's a show that's um it just doesn't have the budget. And
right.
so their effects start to glare a lot more because of that. It's like when you're watching some of the more recent Marvel shows, that where they were straining their VFX crews, that a lot of their VFX were starting to look a little, iffy here and there. Um,
Yeah,
and it's just like, okay, well, let's, maybe work on it a little bit. Let's pull it back a little bit. And that's what I appreciate about like Agatha all along right now is they're doing a lot of stuff practical on set. They're doing
yeah.
less digital for that show, and it really shows. It's an interesting show. But but yeah, Willow, it's definitely this was again, it's a fun movie. It's not I wasn't completely sold on it. It's a solid three for me again. I didn't hate it, didn't love it. Um, I love Val Kilmer. I think he's a great actor. When he's playing that kind of sarcastic, um, he that character that he's really good at playing. That I think that's where he excels. Um, like his character in Real Genius, and Iceman and Top Gun, his character in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, is very indicative of the kinds of characters that I think he does well. And
Absolutely.
I think he's channeling a lot of that in this one too. But he's got some nice heart in this one as well, which was nice. Um,
This is my second favorite Val Kilmer performance of all time. And
oh
actually,
yeah,
my first one is Kiss Kiss Bang
oh yeah,
Bang.
no,
I
no,
think of
he's
him as
great in
Gay
that.
Perry.
Gay Perry,
Uh,
man. That's a great role. That the movie doesn't hold up as well today, unfortunately. It still holds up very well. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely a favorite of mine. But it his character in there is really good.
yeah,
And yeah, I definitely put my two favorites are probably Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and Real Genius for me.
yeah.
Those are just both really great characters. Um, but yeah, no, he's doing a lot of good work in this. Joanne Wally, I think she's doing a good job in this, but she's kind of her character doesn't have for as much as she's an ass-kicking soldier woman and everything like that, I feel like she doesn't have that much agency in the movie.
Yeah.
And again, it's like kind of problematic of the 80s anyway. But yeah, for sure. It's just like, you make her this cool warrior, but then you just kind of like push her to the side a lot, and she just becomes the love interest of Mad Mardigan. So
Which
so
was kind of frustrating. One thing that I did really like about Willow, though, was that the queen was evil. That it was like an
yeah, she was
evil
just
queen
straight up
kind of
evil.
thing.
Yeah.
And again, this is one of those like modern movies I think have kind of made me distrustful of evil women characters because you do just kind of expect her to like have some kind of a redemption arc or be manipulated by a man or
Right.
like it's some kind of like vengeance story or whatever, but she's just like, no, the prophecy says this small child is going to unseat me and I will round up all the pregnant women and start killing babies. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
god. Yeah, okay. So they did a good job with like and I think that's enough motivation for like because we have so many fantasy like evil kings that are just evil for the sake of it. And I
Right.
think in that respect, uh she has aged really well as an antagonist
Right.
because we don't see a lot of that. And I think to the point though about Joanne Wally, I wish that her arc had been more about trying to like get out from under her mom's shadow as
Yeah.
opposed to just because it's like the foreshadowing is there that she's going to do a betrayal and then we see the queen kind of like picking on her and undervaluing her and sending other people out for a job that
Yeah.
she says she could get done. And I was like, that betrayal I think would have been a lot stronger if she hadn't just happened to be in love with Mad Mardigan.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it yeah, like if it had been like both, like I'm not against her falling in love with him, but yeah,
yeah,
if she'd had her own motivation there at the end to help stop her other than just siding with him,
yeah,
then yeah, because it's never you can assume that from the context that that's why she's doing that, but it's never said, on her part that that's why she's now siding with them is like, what, you're right, my mom is terrible. She's always treating me like crap. Let's take her out. But yeah, you never get that directly said by her. So it's kind of like this weird unsaid thing. And it kind of was necessary because otherwise she's just like, oh, well, now she's just the love interest to the main character, to one of the main characters. Um, so yeah, that part was disappointing. Um,
But there were a couple other small gender things that I think also aged surprisingly well in Willow.
okay.
Usually when you rewatch a movie from the 80s, you just are
Oh
kind
yeah.
of prepared to be a little bit
Yes.
like, I
Yeah.
have to put this in its time. But I really like, so Val Kilmer as Mad Mardigan has an arc where he is pretending to be a woman
Yeah.
in this, and it wasn't like a weird thing. I didn't feel like the joke was like, "Ooh, look at Val Kilmer wearing a dress." It was just like, "Ooh, look at Val Kilmer in this disguise." And he kind of owned it the entire
Yeah.
time. He leaned into it. He was very comedic without,
Right.
like relying on anything that I really thought that was something that was going to age very poorly, and I don't think that it did. Um,
No, no, and it's like, and it's funny too because she even remarks about him still having the skirt and everything later on, and so it's just it's something that for he like he wears and owns for the longest time. He kind of modifies it as he goes along, but yeah, it's definitely not something he was upset about, like so.
yeah.
I did
And
find the husband of that woman really like that was really kind of messed up
I
because
that absolutely, yeah.
she's cheating on him with Mardigan and that's bad and everything like that. But like he comes in and as
He's
soon as
also
he sees
really
that
aggressive with
he
Matt Mardigan.
well he comes in, yeah, he comes in, he's like, oh, well, would you like to breed? And I was like, your wife is right there, dude. Like, I mean, I know it's a fantasy world and this is like medieval kind of setting and stuff like that. But dude, come on,
At least get the wife out of the room
Yeah.
first or something. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, no, it's just
Um,
terrible. That part did not age well. Um,
no. The other thing that I think aged really well though was it was really nice to see Willow have like I don't want to say maternal, but there's that very like protective
yeah,
very nurturing energy that he carries through this entire movie, especially when protecting the baby. And it's like,
yeah,
I just think I it's the kind of movie I feel like people would be really weird about today, but that's just
yeah.
aged really well. He's a good dad,
Well,
and
and it's not just him though, because once Mad Mardigan joins in earnest and everything like
yeah,
that, he becomes also very maternal to her as well. So it's an interesting, you know, thing there that they were really kind of leaning into. Look, men can be nurturing and maternal as well without leaning into those like fatherly tropes and everything as well. So
yeah.
it was really nice seeing both of them um do that.
I
It's
thought that
kind
was
of
great. And I thought they had great chemistry on screen as well,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Um,
Willow and Mad Mardigan.
yeah.
Yeah, no, they
I
made a
guess
good duo.
everybody. You
Yeah,
could say that about any on-screen pair, I guess, because the performances were just solid across the
yeah.
board. But
I did think it was interesting too that the sorceress Razel, right, Razel.
yes,
She was obviously she was young when she had been changed, but by the time she was you know gained her human form again, she was an old woman and everything. But it like came down to like an old woman versus an old woman fight.
yeah,
So it was an interesting kind of gender change type thing. This movie was weirdly like progressive
it
in
was,
these weird ways.
and like just another small thing about Razel as well, because she has aged so much, like while she was out of her human form. I thought it was really nice that she's just like that wasn't I again, modern movies just screw up some of the most basic things, but it's like she wasn't disappointed that she was old. She wasn't surprised that she was old. She was just so
Yeah,
happy to be human again. And it's like
yeah.
I really that meant a lot also.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, that was definitely a good thing. She survives to the end, which was great too. Like,
Yeah.
there's a moment where you think she's gonna die, and you're like, oh crap. Well, she got to live just long enough to do that. But it was like really good that, she managed to survive till the end as well. and this goes into what we were saying earlier about Joanne Wally's character as well, being like this, fierce warrior character that's supposed to be like her mom's top person. And so being the woman warrior, and not that Mad Mardigan wasn't a warrior also, but just that, it kind of flipped a lot of those gender roles and stereotypes. And put, I mean, because Zorsha was definitely, you know trying to capture this baby and give it to her mom. She had no maternal instincts for this child.
Right.
And so, it was really interesting for that. um and so it's looking at it with that lens, especially in 1988. We were starting to kind of like ease into that a little bit, like the thought that dads could be good caregivers as well, not just the
Yeah.
breadwinners that were never there. um but yeah, so it definitely was this interesting change. And I think that, again, that may be why the movie didn't do well, um for that time period, because 88, you're at the height of Schwarzenegger, and 88's when the first Die Hard movie came out.
And
87
we've
was when
just had
Lethal Weapon
Top
came out.
Gun and
Yeah, Top Gun. So you have all these manly man movies and stuff like that, and then you have this fantasy movie where all the men are maternal, and not all of them, but the main characters were very maternal. And it's just, yeah, definitely can come off a little different for that time period. But yeah, no, definitely very progressive for its time. And looking back on it, it's aged fairly well overall. So
Yeah. There are a lot of movies that I like and have watched more regularly than Willow that have not aged this well, and
right.
not even necessarily from this far back. Like,
Well, yeah, no,
so
for sure.
it was really nice to rewatch this one and see that there's good stuff in there. And I really liked the stories. I liked the characters. I thought the performances were really great. And I was confused at first, like when I was both when I was younger and then on the rewatch. It's like I think it's very interesting that the movie is named Willow.
Right.
Um because there's so much, it feels so much like an ensemble piece
Yeah.
sometimes, but
Yeah, it feels like it could have been a different movie for sure, like a differently named movie for sure.
yeah, but I mean, Willow has like a really good arc,
Yeah.
and the performance really sells it, and I like this one a lot too. This one probably I'm not going to rewatch anytime in the near future, but I
Yeah.
had a lot of fun revisiting it in preparation for this.
Yeah. Did you ever watch the Disney Plus sequel series?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just learning about that right now.
Yeah, no, it is not available now too, because it was one of the
No.
yeah, it was one of those things that they completely deleted from their catalog, so it's no
Oh
longer
no.
available. I think you can probably find it from some, bootleg sources. Um,
Right.
but um, but yeah, no, it's completely gone otherwise.
Oh, that's so
It's unfortunate.
sad.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
I
Um,
It's also
yeah.
really sad because when it comes to some of those sequel series, cough cough, Dark Crystal,
Yeah.
I think some of the follow-ups ended up being a lot darker than the source
Yeah.
material,
Yeah.
which in a way I ended up kind of liking the Dark Crystal show more because it now appeals to my darker sensibilities as an adult.
Well, and also
Um,
because their storytelling is different as well. Like
yeah.
there's storytelling has changed in a lot of ways. You go back and watch a lot of these movies from the 80s and even some from the 90s, and just anything previous to that as well. Storytelling was a lot different. 2000s and up, I think the way we tell stories changed in a weird fundamental way,
Yeah.
that isn't bad. I think it's actually generally pretty good. We've gotten rid of a lot of the weird tropes and other things that kind of hampered a lot of that earlier stuff. But you also, so I think that's kind of where, like with the Dark Crystal series, is that they probably gave a lot more depth, and I haven't watched it, but it gives it a lot more depth and a lot more kind of exposition as to the world and stuff like that, because that movie was kind of thin on everything. And I feel like the same thing with Willow is you only get enough to kind of know enough to get through the movie, but whereas the
Yeah.
series could probably give you a lot more background about the world and everything else that's going on with it. And so I
Well, I'm
think
not
that's
going to admit to trying to find it on the on the podcast where I'm being recorded, but
yeah.
I that does seem like the kind of thing that I'm definitely going to do
Yeah, yeah.
immediately because I'm curious to see. And you're spot on about Dark Crystal. Like that was kind of uh, they leaned into the richer world building, and we got exposition for some of the things that just a
Right.
movie does not have time for.
Yeah.
Um,
And I also think that it was something that, not just time, but also, they had good ideas. They had good like the beginnings of a good idea that needed more maybe nuance and stuff like that they just couldn't get into.
right.
And that again, stories weren't really doing for movies and TV shows at that time. And so, you needed stuff to evolve, storytelling to evolve.
It's a
So
real double-edged sword, I think, the way that we
yeah,
tell stories now, because as as a 90s kid, there is a lot of the especially with like Monster of the Week kind of fantasy, I
yeah,
guess. I I do kind of miss having filler episodes of things, but
right,
also it is nice that we have like mini series as a storytelling form now where we
right,
can have fantasy worlds that are as indulgent as they are.
right. Yeah,
Like because
yeah.
that's what fantasy nerds like. I'm speaking for all fantasy nerds here. We all like crazy world building.
Yeah,
But yeah, it is as much as I love the aesthetic and the performances and the effects, and some of the like just outrageousness of the 80s fantasy, I do miss that depth of world building, and I like
yeah,
knowing how all the like magic gears work. And it's something that I didn't talk about as much with Legend. I think it's stronger in Willow. I felt like there was a good sense of scale in magic.
yeah.
Where we don't know exactly how it works or how much energy it takes to do these magic things, but you
Right,
felt him like struggling and getting better at it. And I felt like you
right.
had kind of a realistic grasp of what he was going to be capable of or not by the end of the movie, you
Yeah,
know?
no, absolutely. I agree on that one. Yeah, because it felt like, he grew as a sorcerer as he went along, and it felt
Yeah.
earned. And, because he just went through each stage of that and even at the end, he's still just doing beginner stuff. Like, he
Yeah.
hasn't done anything. He's not like a true sorcerer now. He's not like doing complex magics. He's just, throwing the apple up and turning it into a bird. This is something simple.
Yeah.
So it's really good, but it shows just how much he grew just within that little bit of time. And so that was nice to see that kind of growth happen.
And that is one thing that I think is really strong from this era of fantasy as well, because we, in more modern fantasy, I feel like that scale gets thrown out the window more quickly because people always want things to be escalating like very
Yeah,
quickly. So someone will like learn that they have some kind of innate power to mastering it very quickly, and
right.
then we have
Yeah,
to bring out villains that have more mastery, and it's like,
yeah,
no, 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 no.
yeah, yeah. No, and that was what was great about this movie too, as well, is because then what ends up happening is he ends up beating her by no magic,
With
by sleight of
yes.
hand, by literal fake magic. And so, that was what was great about it, was just that at the end, he didn't really need real magic to stop her. So it was yeah, that was a really fantastic aspect of the movie. So
That was so satisfying, and it was also satisfying on the rewatch. Like that makes me
yeah,
happy every time that it's a sleight of hand trick.
right.
Because he gets looked down at it. He gets like
No,
mocked in
yeah.
the
He's the
beginning
joke of the
because
village in the beginning, and he comes back and
yeah,
he's the hero of the village now. So
it's so good.
yeah. No, it's a really good redemption arc on his point, on his part, and he gets to come back, and he's just there, he's just happy to see his family as well. So, it's a really, really great, bit of storytelling in that. with his arc and everything. And I think that's why when it comes down to it, that's why the movie's called Willow.
Yeah.
Because it's just his story. Because you go away and you don't even learn anything else about what's going to happen with Mad Mardigan and Sorsha and everything like that. They're like, no, we don't care about them. We're just focused on Willow. This is Willow's story. So, and it's great. It was a really good role for Warwick Davis to have. And, it was really cool that they did that, because they didn't have to do that. They could have given it to, regular actor and, but they wanted to, again, give it to somebody small and, who could prove themselves. So I thought that was really cool.
I thought it was great, and he did great. And I'm even more impressed knowing he was only 17.
Yeah.
Because really, even on the rewatch, I was like, he's got to be still in like his early 20s, and he just looks young.
Yeah.
Because he's out of the leprechaun makeup. Like,
yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing. It's just like literally 5 years later is when the first Leprechaun is released. So it's literally, he probably made Leprechaun when he was 22. It came out when he was 23. So it's just like, it's so amazing. Just sometimes people's careers like hit those highs early.
It also makes a lot more sense how he was able to make so many Leprechaun movies, I guess.
Yeah,
he started
exactly.
young.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wondered that too. I was like, man, he was doing these for so long. How old was he? Yeah. He's literally like 4 years older than me. So that's so it's like, oh man. So yeah, that's what's funny. So all right. Well, that's all I have to say about both of these. Do you have anything else that you wanted to mention before we close up?
No, thanks for having me on though for
Yeah, of
these.
course.
It was this was like a nice little walk down memory lane this last week, getting to watch these again.
Yeah. I'm glad you were able to come on, and I'm glad we finally got the schedule to link up right for us. But yeah. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on again. Why don't you let
Absolutely.
people know where they can find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at cat_voleur, VOLEUR. You can check out my website, catvoleur.com. I've always got books and stuff for sale. And that's pretty much it, because I am staying put for like the next several months. I've been on the road, which is why
Yeah.
recording was hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no upcoming events, but you can
That's
always,
good.
when there is one to announce, it'll be on the website. So
Yeah. All right. Yeah, definitely go follow her. She's got a new book coming out soon too. The next one in your covers series. I can't remember what it's called offhand.
yes,
Um,
Covered in Darkness. It is
Covered in
coming out
Darkness.
on Halloween.
Ooh,
So,
yay. I've already pre-ordered. Well, I'm already part of
well,
the cover
yeah,
club.
you're gonna be getting it in like a couple days here.
Oh,
But
okay. Excellent.
I was hoping I had like my fingers crossed for the 15th, and then I did
Yeah.
not quite make it in time for the 15th. But
No worries. I will admit I'm kind of behind on reading your stuff. I haven't read Still Waters yet. I need to sit down and read it. Normally I devour your stuff as soon as it comes out, but I've been so scattered lately. I just haven't had the energy and focus to sit and actually read. So, but I will, don't worry. But yeah. But I am excited to get the new one. So that'll be very cool. All right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely get you on sooner rather than later. Probably early in the next year for sure. So,
yes, looking
all
forward
right.
to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Harper Smith. You can follow the podcast by going to creepyandgeeky.com and clicking on any of the social links. If you'd like to follow me, you can find my links at geekthulu.com. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.